everyone for joining us tonight. So tonight's session is on saying goodbye, how to shape a good exit experience. It is the last session of our community leadership series for the year. In the meantime, while the introduction goes on, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. You can say your name, the organization you're from, what your organization is about, just so we can get a sense of everybody who is in the room this evening. Do note that this session will be recorded. So this recording for the panel discussion will be on Zoom later. So if you would like to share the content from the session with your colleagues or friends, volunteers, feel free to send that along. Later, we'll also be taking a group photo. If you're uncomfortable with group photos and you don't want your face to be shown, it's okay. You can just turn off your video. But if you would like to join us in the group photo, then feel free to turn your cameras on. I am Grace, and I will be your host for tonight. I host these sessions, and this is the last one for the year. This session is organized by NVPC's Community Matters team. So NVPC is a national nonprofit that promotes a giving culture in Singapore. And we run these sessions with the hope of nurturing healthy, thriving communities that are able to give better and receive from one another. So we hope that from these sessions, you'll be able to take away ideas or practices that you'll be able to apply into your own context, and hopefully at the end of this session have a clearer idea of what exactly is this exit phase about. Tonight's topic is on saying goodbye, how to shape a good exit experience. And the program outline for today is as such. So there are 4 main sections. Right now we are in the welcome and introduction. So I'll be briefly talking about what the exit phase is and what is the community journey. Then afterwards, we'll be going to the breakout room. So the first breakout room is an opportunity for you to meet and chat with other participants in tonight's session, who may also be having similar experiences from you or different experiences from you. But the hope is that you'll be able to learn from one another, from your own experiences. Then we'll come back into the main room for our panel discussion and Q&A before wrapping up in a breakout room again for you to debrief and digest the discussion that you've been listening into tonight. And hopefully you'll be able to identify some takeaways for the session by the end of the evening. So for tonight, we're going to hopefully share with you the importance of considering the exit process. Hopefully you'll be able to take away some strategies on how to shape a better exit that can be used by both members, leaders, and communities. And this could look like volunteers, volunteer managers, and nonprofits, employees, managers, companies, colleagues, teams, reporting officers. Hopefully, there'll be a chance for you to reflect on your own experiences and to learn from other people. And lastly, to identify applicable takeaways from the session. So without further ado, I will share with you a bit on the overview of the community journey. So this schema is a rough frame that talks about the journey that a person takes within a community. And the reality is that all of us are part of different communities. So this could be our workplaces, it could be our neighborhoods, it could be our religious groups, hobby groups, volunteering groups. And these are all different communities that we are part of. And more often than not, we are involved in more than one community. And all communities have a journey. So you can think about your own personal context, maybe your schooling journey or your first job or your second job, right? There's an entry, there's a starting point, there's an experience, and eventually there will be an end. So in the course of the community leadership series this year, we've actually run different workshops that have covered different stages of the community journey. We did one on onboarding, one on leadership succession, and tonight we are looking at the exit phase. There are different stakeholders in the exit phase that are affected when someone decides to leave. And typically you may be thinking, okay, it's just the person who's leaving, but also there are other people who are affected, such as the community that remains, the leader who has to manage the person who has to leave, or has to offboard the person who's leaving, as well as the organization with the organization's goals that are now affected with the departure of certain individuals. The words that we're using tonight, the exit phase, can be used interchangeably because different people use different terms to describe this ending season, right? Someone may call it like quitting, someone may say leaving the community, someone may say exit, some may say the end. So different people may use different terms. All terms are fine depending on how you choose to frame the situation. And I think you can also think about this from different points of view. So maybe tonight you're here as a volunteer manager. So you may be thinking about how do you offboard volunteers, or how do you deal with volunteer attrition? Maybe tonight you're here from your reporting officer or team leader hat, and you're thinking about, okay, how do I deal with a situation where a team member decides to move on from the organization or quit? Perhaps you are someone who's here tonight thinking about changing job and thinking about, okay, how, if I leave this role, how can I exit gracefully? Or perhaps you're an intern tonight thinking about how I can maintain contacts with the people in an organization after I end my internship. There are a lot of different perspectives and a lot of different headspaces that you may be in tonight. And we hope that there'll be something in here for you, because we hope that we'll be able to address some bits of the whole exit phase. If you're an individual leaving, you're someone who remains having to deal with, the workload after a colleague quits, to a leader having to manage offboarding and attrition. And if you're a leader in an organization thinking about what now, how to move forward with this. When we talk about the exit phase, there are also different sub-stages within it. So perhaps the first phase that we've categorized would be when someone is considering to leave or displaying symptoms of wanting to leave. A second phase could be when a decision has been made and this person is telling you that they have already decided to leave, and then begins the handover, the exit process. This may look very different depending on your own context. So for tonight, just think about yourself and your own context and apply the concepts that you hear, the stories that you hear, into what makes sense for you. Not everything will be applicable, but we hope that at least through hearing the stories of other people, you'll be able to glean something for your own context. And lastly, the actual last day, when the person sends their farewell messages or leaves all the WhatsApp chats or sends that goodbye email. Depending on your own context, it manifests in different forms. Okay, and so that was the welcome and introduction. We're now going to move into the breakout room section. So we'll be in the breakout rooms for the next 30 minutes. If you have just joined us and you don't know what's going on, thank you for joining us tonight. This session will be until 10 o'clock. I'm just going to briefly explain the program again for the people who just joined the call. So what we'll be doing now is we'll be going to the breakout rooms for 30 minutes. And in your breakout rooms, you'll get a chance to know a few other participants from the call tonight. They may be people in a similar context as yourself or in a very different context. So we tried to do the groupings based on what you indicated when you registered about what you're interested in. So if you indicated something that you weren't interested in, or you forgot what you indicated, you can just learn from the people that you meet tonight. Then afterwards, after the first breakout room session, so the purpose of the first breakout room is really for you to kind of anchor yourself into tonight's topic, thinking about your own personal experiences or how your organization manages or navigates this exit phase. Then we'll come into the main room where we'll have a panel discussion with our three speakers for tonight, who I'll introduce later. So if you have any questions, feel free later to add them in the chat. And lastly, we will go back into our breakout rooms again, where you will reconnect with the friends you made earlier to talk about your takeaways from the session and to kind of wrap up. Then we'll end promptly at 10, and then we'll be off for the rest of the night and enjoy the rest of your week ahead. So now we will be doing a quick share back from some of the groups, just so that you'll be able to get a sense of the discussions in the other rooms. So we have maybe like 16 or 17 breakout rooms tonight. I hope that your conversations are good. You'll go back into these breakout rooms afterwards at the end of the session so you can continue your conversations further. On this note, I'd like to invite Leonard to share back a summary of his group's discussion.
Thank you, Grace. I had Remy, Christy, and Jayu in my room. Their experiences are around volunteer management and HR. So they do deal with both staff and volunteers. And thematically, the questions were more around what counts as a good offboarding experience, right? And what are some of the ideas that they could incorporate. And from the HR side, yes, obviously there's a little bit more structure to that, right? Because you have all the way from the resignation letter, notifying the department heads, and all those other processes. But from the volunteer part, perhaps less formal, but there's still that element of necessary conversations, necessary process and protocols to go through. There's one thing I could highlight from the sharing. It was a very interesting point about how Christy had actually introduced appreciative inquiry into their process of offboarding, which is about really acknowledging some of the high moments, the key points, the key contributions. I think Remy had also shared a little bit about that as well, and how that actually strengthens the engagement. And even though it's a different phase and people have to move on, there's a very strong resonance there that actually allows for a deeper connection for possibly future engagements. So just a quick highlights of my group there. Thank you.
Thank you, Leonard. That was a really comprehensive summary. Next, can I invite Amanda to share a summary from your group?
Hey, hi. So my group had Kel from Aware, Kelvin and Yuan Hao, who are both MOE educators. And we also had Clarissa, who joined in a little bit late for our discussion. So we talked quite broadly about their experiences exiting organizations, as well as for managing the exit processes for their own community. So that could look like students, or that could look like donors that they handle in their areas of work. So I think we talk broadly about how we can appreciate how we can appreciate the exit process by appreciating and recognizing the contributions that individuals have made in their communities or in their organizations, so that kind of uplifts that exit process, or even allows individuals to reconsider, whether they want to actually stay on in that role to continue making an impact in the current work that they already do. And I think we also talked a little bit about the exit process not just being an end, but also a beginning, because even when you're leaving your school, or when you're leaving your organization, there's still that opportunity to continue building the relationships that you've had, and to make that exit a pleasant one, because you're building a new beginning to that kind of friendship that you have with the people you've worked with, or the people that you were surrounded by. And also we talked a little bit about how COVID has kind of disrupted that exit process, where instead of having a more personable kind of departure, like when you're leaving an organization, in the past maybe you would have the opportunity to meet everyone face to face just to say your goodbyes, but now there's a lot more adapting and flexibility in terms of managing that exit process when it's all done online. So yeah, that's a very quick summary of some of the discussion points that we've had.
Amanda. Martin.
Yeah, so my group was Zhengfu, Margaret, and Zoe, and we kind of shared on quite a few, like 3 main points of like exiting. So we kind of summarized it as to make it smooth, to make it gracious, and to make sure that there's improvement that comes out of it. So smooth being like there's both sides have this smooth process that helps each other, and gracious whereby we are all like open to ensuring that each party has like the best experience moving forward throughout this exit process. And also improvement, where our group mentioned they usually experience, it's more like pull factors from the outside that causes people to leave, but in the end it's also kind of to tap on and make sure that the organization within themselves like still can improve with any feedback, and also at the end of the day it's also to still maintain these relationships that are built already, and it's always to keep like warm, like for example one of our group members also like discuss of how we can have members who left like to return back to talk about best practices, especially within the industry, also to maintain like a personal touch with all these people who may leave, and just tap onto existing friendships, and just keeping the door open for them to return back if they want to. Yeah.
Thanks, Martin. I'll just ask one last facilitator to share back. Ting Kai.
Hey, thanks, Grace. Yeah, my group consisted of Melissa, Hannah, David, Sandra, and Shaylee. And I think our conversations revolved quite a lot around the different types of exits that we see. So there are like voluntary exits, there are involuntary ones, right? And there are those that are the unspoken type of exits, where there are differences in expectations, and you need to manage an exit without actually exiting directly, right? So there are all these different scenarios in which we communicated across, and I think there were a few interesting points that came out of it, and sometimes about when it comes to orchestrating people leaving, is that something that is acceptable? Like, in reality, it happens, it is true. But how can we also manage exits in a kind and humane way, right? Manage exits with compassion. How can we have transparency around it, right? And really, how can we put a human touch into exits, right? Because I think like what Martin said as well, there's so much relationships that go into all these different communities that we build, right? And when we have an exit, these relationships are always what becomes at risk. So how can we manage that and try to maintain the relationship and keep it going as well? So there are all these different elements to it, and I think it was quite a rich discussion that we had. Thanks, Grace.
Thanks, Kai. It's really such a range of conversations just from our own different contexts and experiences. Now we're going to move into the panel discussion. So thanks everyone for the conversations in the breakout room. Later at the end of the panel discussion, we'll be able to go back into the breakout room for all of you to reconnect and continue your conversations. At this point, I'm going to share my screen and take us through the next section. So what's going to happen for the next slightly under an hour is we will be having a panel discussion with our invited speakers for today, followed by an open Q&A. So the structured panel discussion is really just some questions that we pre-planned. We hope to cover these three broad topics: the importance of the exit process, who's affected, ways in which leaders can facilitate a good exit, and finally, how to leave well when at some point in time you move on from the current context or community or organization that you're in. Tonight, we have three really awesome panelists. I'm very grateful that they have given us their evening and their experiences to share. We have Shaylee, Justin, and Alvin. Always hearing introductions by like the long body bio is a bit boring, so I'll invite them to introduce themselves. Shaylee, over to you.
Yeah. Hi, I just briefly met some of you in the breakout room. So my name is Shelley, and I've largely been in HR profession for the past more than 2 decades. Large part of my life was in the financial services industry, like Merrill Lynch, Standard Chartered, Edelweiss Financial Services. My last 5 years of corporate life has been in consulting, which is Deloitte Consulting and PwC. I now kind of run my own consulting firm. During pandemic, something interesting happened that many of us were struggling with, how to lead our people in a hybrid environment. I happened to design this program for a NASDAQ listed company. Almost 800 managers across the world attended this program. And I guess they benefited significantly by this program. I'm also in the board committee of NVPC, and I'm also on the board of Titareke Matra. And I enjoy these conversations and sessions. This is my 3rd session, and I feel very, very tightly involved with NVPC, and it is always a joy to come back again and again and again and again for these sessions, because there's so much more to learn from each one of you. Thanks, Leonard, for that small clap. Over to you, Grace.
Thanks, Shaylee. Next, we have Justin.
Hi everyone, I'm Justin from LCCS. I think first I wanted to say thanks to Grace and NVPC for the invitation. I'm really, really honored to share about our practices, but at the same time also quite pressured because there are like 78 other people here, and then for the next 1 hour, that's like 78 hours of time spent. So I really hope to be helpful to you. Just a little bit about LCCS. We are all about driving a restorative movement to break the cycle of hurt, and we do this through restorative practices. One of our taglines is that relationships matter, and like I was sharing in the group earlier on, when we talk about relationships with the people that we work with, relationships with our colleagues also matter, and so we really want to walk the talk. In fact, in that sense, I've been with LCCS since 2007, so that's been 14 years. I've seen many transitions, colleagues from single to married, from married to being parents, from parents to being grandparents. So it's really great to see people through the life stages. Actually, also from attached to breakup also have, but that's a different goodbye. I don't think we're going to talk about that tonight. So maybe if you can go on to the next slide. This is just a snapshot of some things that are important to us in LCCS. Next slide, please. Yes. So as you see the picture at the top left, then I ask you, what do you think is important to us at LCCS? You probably think food, but food is really just a great way to connect. Actually, what's more important than food is, like what I mentioned, relationships. And if you look at the picture at the bottom, that is actually a screenshot of a goodbye circle. And it's quite strange because you see people smiling in that picture. So be wondering like, oh, are these people happy that this person is leaving? But that's really the state of emotions that we're at. We used to do this in person, but now we do this on Zoom. So it's not really like a circle. You just see lots and lots of squares. And well, I'm just wondering whether you can guess who is the one who's leaving. Whether you can guess who do you think is the one who is going off. Definitely not me. Apparently someone texted my colleague a goodbye cube. That's a great one. Someone texted my colleague and said that, hey, it's Justin leaving because I received this email from NVPC. He's saying goodbye. No, I'm not. I'm here to stay, unfortunately. It's really great to be able to share about the goodbye circle. I will share with you later how we design these circles, and you can see if it's helpful for you. On the right-hand side, generally, we design it using our 7 principles. These principles are how we treat people that we work with, but it's also how we treat each other at LCCS. So this guides our work and it's consistent throughout. I would share more later. And thanks for all the comments on the chat. It's super entertaining. Over to you, Grace.
Thanks, Justin. Next, we have Alvin.
Hi, yes, thanks for having me here and a kind introduction. I'm sharing a bit more different perspective, more from a long-time volunteer in the people sector. And here I'm speaking as like the ex-chief curator for Young Changemakers Grant under the National Youth Council. So in the next slide, it pretty much summarizes how 3 key functions that we play as the curators at YCM. First being grant making, which is our core function. And we are pretty much the only grant in Singapore where youths are empowered to decide for other youths, a youth for youth kind of program, who gets the funding and what kind of projects that we want to see being seeded on the ground. And then we support a wide range of youth-related projects from the arts to community service, education, tech, etc. And we disperse these grants during a session called Open Mic Session, where we help, which are held on a monthly basis, and applicants are invited to come down, and like the boardroom that you see here, where we deliberate all the different applicants that we have seen, their pitches, and then who should be funded or who should not be. And during the session there, if you notice at the bottom right section of the photo, there's like a birthday cake as well. And we do a lot of community building exercise. That's another key mandate of what we do at YCM, as well as the larger parent organization, NYC, to understand and sense make the state of youth in Singapore. So we do a lot of social activities, and the way we form ourselves from onboarding all the way to offboarding, which I will talk about more later. And then the third part is about also having a lot of developmental opportunities to help to advance, like in terms of skills development, exposure for the youth. So in the next slide, pretty much a lot of photos to show that we don't just evaluate grants, we also run community projects ourselves. On the left-hand side, you see a mass picnic event that we ran for migrant workers in 2015, and right-hand side is showing my exit process, where the organization was like giving me a certain token of appreciation in that little art that you see there. The Zoom rooms that we have, how we transited from physical session to Zoom sessions, and how my own onboarding process was at a Sembawang camp. You can see that gate formed by the kayak paddle. And then pretty much how this transit from my time in 2015, and now when I onboard new curators, I bring them to like a tea house to do like a tea appreciation. And in the next slide, it pretty much shows the kind of thinking process that we put through to how you want to develop ourselves. And it's all pretty much designed and developed by the volunteers themselves for the volunteers. Yeah. And this is pretty much what I'll be talking more about later. If not, that's all for my sharing now.
Perfect.
Oh,
Thank you, Alvin. I'm just going to stop sharing so that we can see each other's faces. And now we shall move into our panel discussion. Okay, spotlight. How do you spotlight 4 people at once? Okay, never mind. The tech people have to do the spotlighting. So thanks everyone for being here today. And now just direct the first question for our panel discussion to Shady. Shady, could you share with us why thinking about the exit is so important?
Yeah, I'm happy to. See separation, or if you were to use the word lien or quitting, is always it leaves not so happy emotions, right? It's never a very pleasant emotion. It is always a sad emotion. I think the entire effort in this lien or separation is how to make it, less anxious, or how to make it pleasant, and how to make it a happy one. If you can't make it a very, very happy one, can you make it neutral? Can you minimize the angst and unhappiness where the person is very, very bitter? So in my breakout room, we were hearing about lots of these unhappy separations, right? So how do we kind of minimize all that is extremely important. So here, I think the couple of things that I wanted to talk about is, give me a minute, yeah. I want to talk about is it's a part of an employee life cycle or a volunteer life cycle. It is inevitable that somebody who was onboarded someday is going to offboard, even if it is not about exiting, it could be also because of retirement, right? The separation is inevitable. So when we cannot control it, we would accept it. So however, what is important is how do you then make controlling the factors for this separation? My only conversation in the corporate world used to be that attrition is inevitable. Do not kind of fret about it. As an HR, oh, we have a very high attrition. I wouldn't lose my sleep over it at all, being honest. What I would lose my sleep over is on the reasons for exit. If it is because of bad leadership, if it's because of bad relationship, if it is because of toxic work culture, if it's because of corporate bullying, I think that's unacceptable, right? But if somebody is leaving for higher education, my family is relocating, better opportunities, or I'm going to be in line with the work that I was expecting, and your current organization cannot offer that work to me. By all means, I want to bless you, want to kind of celebrate your exit and give you a big farewell, and our paths will cross someday once again. But just, go and rise and shine, and wherever you are, make it big. That is what we will look for. So I think what we need to focus on is on these push factors, which are, sometimes, which are not very pleasant ones. The pull factors is beyond our control. People will get opportunities in this world, and we need to celebrate that for them and let it be, and have a very happy separation, as what I think I just saw Justin's pictures, which are so beautifully presented there, right? So make a very graceful exit. But however, I think in subsequent sessions, we will talk about that there are various phases of this attrition or resignation, and how there are multiple stakeholders which are involved in these phases, and what can we do, to minimize that angst or to minimize that unhappiness is something that, we shall talk about it as we move forward. Grace?
Thanks, Shady. I'm going to direct the same question to Justin.
Yeah, actually, Grace, could you put up the slide, please? So as Grace is putting up the slide, I just wanted to say that I resonate with what Shirley has just said, that when people move on, there's a whole range of emotions, and it's really great to, of course, shift them from negative to positive, but at the very bare minimum, to shift them to neutral state. And in fact, that's so important for LCCS because our key thrust is to break the hurt cycle. Can you imagine how incongruent we would be if our own colleagues and staff or interns actually are hurt in the process of working with us? And how detrimental that would be to that whole idea of a restorative movement. So it's really important for us to be congruent. And in fact, I just wanted to put this up here, kind of to mention that we do need to be consistent and congruent while we are talking about designing goodbye experiences. If the goodbye experience is so wonderful and so stark different from the rest of the experience of the organization, Grace mentioned it's a community journey, but the whole 90% of the journey was horrible. And then the last 10% was suddenly very good. I would get really suspicious. What are you trying to do? So this slide here is really just to remind us. I mean, if you think about it, and it says a staff student experience, but you can change the word staff to anything you want, right? Volunteer, community member. You know, if you, the left-hand side are some things that of course are challenging. Like for example, you know, if you have a conflict, do you on the left-hand side sweep it under the rug, or do you on the right-hand side provide a safe space? When a colleague is struggling, do we ignore what's happening, or do we proactively widen a network of support? When we achieve results, let's say there's something great that happened in the organization, do we affirm in isolation, or do we celebrate the successes together? Or when we do work, are we doing it on our own, or are we building a community? So imagine if a community member experiences everything on the left-hand side. Two questions. What would this person say when this person leaves your organization or community? And the second question is, what impact would this have on your community? On the contrary, if a person experiences everything on the right-hand side, what would this person be saying when they leave your organization or community? What impact would it have on your community? And I think I just want to ask a third question. What experience would most likely help this individual who is moving on still feel connected to your organization and continue as a mouthpiece of your work? That's what I wanted to leave you with.
Thank you, Justin. On that note, the next question is for Alvin. How does your organization, or I mean, in the young change makers, right, as you navigate volunteer exits, what does the organization do when a volunteer decides to leave?
So for YCM, because we are all volunteer driven, I would say it's very different from what Justin was saying about how we can apply the same logic to be it for a staff versus a volunteer, because volunteer we have less legal obligations to begin with, and really we are there because of what we can or want to bring or get out from the experience. And so we have to think from YCM, how are we benefiting the volunteers themselves for the time they're giving here, and what value do they bring? And so these are the things that we talk to them about as we bring them on board, and as we bring them off board. How have we been keeping a good track record of like how are they contributing and the value that they brought to the organization, and how are we celebrating that? Yeah. So in the flow chart that I showed earlier, exit process for us usually starts with like exit interviews, and if they want to have like recommendation letters, how can we support them in their next step? Yeah, it's really more of a positive experience overall. So that's pretty much what we do in YCM. Yeah.
Alvin, how big is the YCM volunteer community? And you know, when you say you're doing exit interviews, right? Who does these exit interviews? Like, how often do you conduct them? When do you conduct them?
We organize the volunteers in social circles, and so social circles have their own ICs. And then when they want to leave, they can either talk directly to the chief curators, or they tell their IC first, and then we will conduct exit interview by the chief curators ourselves. Yeah, and so we will engage with them one-on-one, and find out like why are they leaving, where are they going, and how can we support them in the process. Yeah. And then we take their feedback really seriously and try to drive any changes if it is anything negative. But usually in our context, it's usually positive, phase of life change. In my own context, because I'm going overseas, I'm planning to go overseas for my own career development, and therefore I'm not renewing my term of a service with YCM. Yeah. And many other volunteers typically leave because of like childbirth, moving overseas, or different job commitments that makes them unable to commit to YCM. Yeah.
And you also mentioned that you offer to write recommendation letters. Is that for everyone?
Yeah. So for any curators who would like a recommendation letter,
Okay.
only if it brings value to them. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very thoughtful.
Yeah, it need not be in the form of recommendation letter. So yeah. So we hear what they would like, and then we see whether, as long as within reasonable grounds, and we can support.
That's awesome. I mean, just thinking for all the like people who are volunteer managers here, offering recommendation letters or just hearing from Alvin's perspective. On this note, if any of you have any questions, feel free to type in the chat. Now that you have a better sense of the speaker profile, if you have any questions that you would like to ask, feel free to ask them in the chat. And I'll continue on to ask Justin the same question. How do you at LCCS navigate once someone decides to leave?
Okay, so I've just dropped into the chat link to our website, and then if you scroll that website down, you would see there are 7 principles. I can't talk about all 7 because we're going to be here all night, and I'm sharing this voice space with 2 other fantastic people. So I just talk about 3, and I won't explain them in detail. The 3 principles that come to mind, actually all of them do apply one way or another, but the 3 principles that I feel apply the most when it comes to facilitating a good exit. One is relational inclusion. The whole idea that no one should feel like they are exiting your community on their own. That when you exit a community, you're assured that this community that you're part of, that you've given your time, your energy, your life. I think like Alvin mentioned that it's from a volunteer's perspective, even more amazing. Can you imagine? You're not getting paid, but you're giving time. So you've given up so much. It would be really great if the community honors you, celebrates you, and gives you an opportunity to have a voice to share about your experience. That's one. So that's relational inclusion. The second one is about respecting voice space. So it's not just the voice, but it's also empowering the individual with the choice on how he or she would like to communicate his or her exit. I can't assume that everybody would love that cold HR email. Some people might say, I want to inform others first. I want to have this conversation. Can you help me to send this email? I would like to send a WhatsApp myself. So we ask them, we give them power. What would be a good way for you to share with the rest of the colleagues that you are moving on? And so it's different for everybody because all individuals are different, right? So we really believe in doing things with you. We're not doing things to you, neither am I doing things for you. Sometimes it's really easy to do it quick and dirty. It saves a lot of trouble. I just make an announcement. I send you a template email. But then this individual has no power over how he or she wants to plan the exit. And I feel that's not really honoring the individual. The third principle is building a positive, effective experience. The word effective sometimes is interchanged with emotions. They are quite different, but I won't go into that detail. And I'm just thinking about the saying by Maya Angelou. She's an American poet. She's a civil rights activist. And she says, people will forget what you said or you did, but never forget how you made them feel. So in that sense, providing an experience is so important because while you cannot control the circumstance of this person leaving your organization, it could be a positive reason or a negative reason. Like what Shaylee said, if it's positive, then you celebrate. If it's negative, like for example, this person got terminated because maybe it's not a good fit. And in LCCS, we do have to handle staff terminations. You can ask me more later if that's what you want to hear more about. You can't control that, but you can most certainly control. It's within your power to control. How do you want to craft an experience that is respectful, that is engaging, that is honoring to the person? Because the baseline is, at least at LCCS, we do not want people to leave the organization in a hurt posture. It's really terrible if we are about breaking the hurt cycle and then actually we are the hurt cycle or we started the hurt cycle. But yeah, at the same time, to be really realistic, sometimes we inherit people who are hurt. They have been hurt from another previous community that they were part of, a previous workplace. They carry that with them. They respond in a certain way because of the past experiences. And also in the same way, we wanted to then provide a different experience so that that person knows that there is a full spectrum of how you can make an exit and feel honored by what you have experienced in that process. Yeah, so that's what I just have to share.
Thank you, Justin. Shaylee, any additional thoughts on how a leader can facilitate a good exit experience?
Justin, I'm sure you and your team make a fabulous manager, and every corporate or organization would die to have you. These words are music to my ears, only if we could teach all leaders to behave or have this thought process. Fantastic. What I'm going to do is for the group, I will step back a little bit. Let me just talk about, I think, what Grace spoke about, different phases of exit. as a great leader, whether a community leader or somebody who's heading a nonprofit, or as a corporate leader or a manager, the actually the employee or your staff is giving you signals before resigning. You know, if you are tuned in, you will be able to catch those signals. You know, what I call phase one. There could be frequent absence. This could be like being non-participative, not kind of volunteering for, you know, new projects. If you're tuned into your team, you will pick up these body languages and your signals way earlier. And in my mind, this is the best phase to engage in, especially for the person whom you're wanting to retain. This is a time when there is a very high possibility that you'll be able to retain your talent and you know, make sure that he or she stays back in the organization. The second phase is when the person has actually submitted the resignation, you know, and then you're trying to have a retention conversation. A lot of the elements of what Justin spoke about, the restorative conversation, is extremely important. We many times are very shy of asking a question that, how can I retain you? Because when I ask this question, what if this person comes back and says, oh, give me promotion, give me money, you know, and I can't give that, right? So why ask that question? But in my mind, even if it is not in your control, asking these open-ended questions and communicating your feelings for the person, that you're valuable for me and I would really want to retain you. Tell me, what can I do to retain you? You know, it's fairly okay. And just say, okay, let me deliberate this. Let me think about it, and I'll come back to you. And you could come back and say, I raised your concern to the larger committee or to my higher ups. It's so unfortunate that I'm not able to, you know, get you what you want, but I'm still very keen that you stay back. It's okay to say that, okay to show your love and affection for the individual, right? The third phase is extremely critical. And that is where I think a lot of you guys will have an opinion when managing that notice period, right? Your resignation has been accepted, whether you were a high performer or whether you've been asked to go in both the situation. Suddenly your leader doesn't make eye contacts, you've been stopped from attending any of the important meetings. Your team members are trying to see whether it was a pleasant exit or was it an unpleasant exit. So should I want to be seen with this individual? You start isolating your colleague, right? And that, in my mind, is the worst time. That is when, even if it was a voluntary exit, you have left the whole experience, which is very unpleasant. You know, in my mind, that is one phase which is managed very badly by most of the corporates, most of the communities, most of the leaders. You know, suddenly the person who was very trusted, the minute you put resignation, you stop marking emails to the person, you stop copying emails to the person, you stop telling the person that there is a meeting and I've not invited you. I get to know from others, oh, aren't you coming for the meeting? But I haven't got an invite for this meeting, you know. And those kind of cold vibes are something which leaves a very bad experience. And the fourth one in my mind is the really important one, when the person has actually stepped out of the organization. How are you ever staying connected with that person? Because there is a possibility of this person wanting to come back. You know, are you wishing them well? Are you staying in touch with the person saying, how are you doing in the new organization? Are you settling in well? Please remember, if people don't have a good onboarding in the new organization, in the first 90 days, they tend to quit again. Are you able to bring your talent back? And you can do that only if you are staying connected. Even if they don't come back, are you able to create an ambassadorship in them? That is, once they have quit, they're still so positively and emotionally attached to the organization, they can become your customer. They can become your fundraiser. They can become your partner. They can connect you as with somebody meaningful in your work, just because they think very highly of you as you as an organization. So can you create ambassadors? Just imagine in 5 years, even if you're running attrition in double digit, you know, literally 50% of your organization is sitting outside you, you know. So while 100 people inside the organization are working for the organization, if you can have 50 people sitting outside the organization also working for you without having to pay the salary, isn't that a compelling force? And that's the force you're missing out on. And that's when, in my mind, it is an economic sense more than being, a right thing to do, to kind of invest in your exit process and make that a pleasant experience for the people. Yeah, Grace?
Thanks, Shady. I'm going to pass the time over to Alvin, who has a comment.
Yep. So I was thinking, based on these 4 phases, in the context of a volunteer like YCM, an organization like this, we don't really go from phase 1 to 2 to 3 to 4. We typically have like phase 1, and then we jump to phase 4 next, right? We do not have like any HR practices involved. There's no like volunteer managers kind of structure involved. So it's very different, I would say, in a very much volunteer-driven kind of groups. And for phase 1, we have like our social circles, and then they will notify if there's anything wrong. They will sound off to the chief curators, and we can check in. But it need not always be like us checking in. So within the social circles themselves, this is one of the key functions that the social circles do, which is like checking in on each other and forming strong social connection. And when we know each other, we have strong relationships, then it's easy for us to keep each other engaged within the YCM community. Yeah. And then if they were to want to exit, they don't really need to submit any resignation or serve any notice period. They typically just be able to jump to phase 4. And then it's really more on how or what we can do to facilitate their exit such that it is done in a very positive way. And my advice, or even the way that I did it for myself, is how am I going to exit in a way that there is no institutional memory loss, because we are volunteer driven. A lot of things that we do and create are all done by ourselves. And then we have our own resource portals, and ensuring that the people who are still, one of the stakeholders, the people who are still there, they know what has been done and are able to not feel lost, not feel your loss, and operationally lost as well when you leave. So I think that's about being responsible as you exit, or as I exit. And then next is about how am I going to help myself have a good exit or a good closure. Sometimes I think I saw comments about how people do not want to be involved, self-isolate, say you want to engage them, but they may not want to be engaged. I think that's fine as well, even if we have people who wants to so-called be a ghoster. I think it's about having mutual respect, the way that different people cope with their exit process. For mine, it's about posting different thank you notes to people, posting like a reflective kind of piece out there, for not just for myself, but also for people to know more about young change makers and be enticed or being a good ambassador for others to join YCM as well. So that is the way I manage my own exit, and the way that I share with my fellow curators as well.
If I can I just jump in, Grace, and respond to something that Sherry said? And Hannah shared the most epic story, so you can read that. And thanks, Ethan, for the question. I think first I wanted to respond to what Sherry mentioned about the importance of picking up the signs and having a conversation, not shying away from a difficult conversation. Sometimes what I also refer to as a missing conversation, and we really need to take courage to have that. Being able to ask the question, how can I keep you? Or in our context, we would ask, how can we honor you? I think sends a message to the individual that you matter. And that ties back with what Yifeng asked, right, about social work values. So I'm really not a HR practitioner, not an expert in that, but I think from a social work practice point of view, we talk often about respecting the worth of all individuals. They could be in poverty, but they have worth, they have value, they have strength, they have resilience. So likewise, the same thing. How do we respect the worth of that individual who has contributed to your organization at some point, given of him or herself, and then now is moving on. And I think Sherry mentioned 2 things. One, this person becomes an ambassador. 2, this person could come back. Actually, both are win-win situations. Talking about ambassador, we had a colleague, ex-colleague who left LCCS. She joined a government agency, and she continued on her work in restorative practices. A couple of years later, she and her bosses contacted us and said, hey, we've observed how this person has worked. Now we've promoted her to an assistant manager. She's leading a team. She leads in an awesome way. Can you come and train our entire division in this government agency? So actually that became an opportunity because she became an ambassador, and we managed to reach a wider audience. So that's one. I think 2 people coming back really matters. And at LCCS, we are a small team, 25 staff, and 24% of them have left the organization and came back. So, and I love that because when you leave the organization, you go out, you're not on our payroll, but you learn so much good stuff. And then you come back so much better, right? I mean, how awesome is that? So we have, at least a good number of them. Yeah, about the most epic experience, Yifeng, I'm meeting you for lunch next week, right? So share with you then.
Thank you, Justin. I mean, just to add on also, I think that it's very amazing how people come back, right, with like the skill sets that they take, and how important it is to view the people who are departing as future ambassadors, like, so giving them the as meaningful an exit as possible. There's a question in the chat that I wanted to raise, which is for any of you to answer, which is what are some good ways to appreciate someone who wants to leave quietly, or has perhaps already left a community chat? Maybe Alvin, any thoughts?
I was like about to type a reply to Ting Ting's question. I would personally drop a message to the leaver, to the person to thank them, and then leave my door open for a meetup, a chat, or anything in any ways that I can support them. Yeah, I think that is what I could do from my end, or what I have been doing. So.
I think the only other thing that I may want to say is that when somebody has left the organization, in many other formal and informal ways, they are somewhere connected. We may think, oh, the person has left, so I can now just talk and say anything that I want to say. But even when you're not in the organization, all the conversations get relayed back to the person. So I think you need to be responsible in your communication and respectful, even after the person is left. Because that is what kind of build that bond about the individual. Many organizations, and I can see Hannah's post here, once the person has left, they want to make it sound like, oh, we asked the person to leave, because it's a betrayal. I don't want to look bad that you have left my organization. So you want to communicate, or you've left my leadership. So I want to communicate, oh, anyway, the person wasn't doing well and we had asked the person to go. Right? You want to spread that kind of a message. So I think in this corporate war to show that who is better, somewhere, I think as a leader, as an organization, in my mind, you are creating disrespect for yourself because people can see through it. The generosity and what do I say? The genuineness comes in when you're gracious enough that even if it was a exit which was forced, you kind of come back and say that, we will miss the person for whoever he or she was. It is so unfortunate that we had to part ways. You don't have to start bitching about the person. You don't have to start talking ill about the person because it's reaching the person. And he or she has friendships and certain bonds in the organization which are not receiving this very well, right? So you're hurting them in the process. So I guess that is what I would want to leave behind for a thought.
Thanks, Shirley. On that note, actually something I wanted to ask Justin to share a bit about. So, I mean, for context of everyone who's listening in today, actually one of the things that we do when we curate these sessions, for all the community leadership series talks that we do is we actually meet with the panelists one-on-one before, just to meet them, learn from them, understand the practices, and also kind of tease out what are like the key things that we really want them to share tonight with all of you. And one of these practices that I heard from Justin was this thing called goodbye circles, which I think, it's a great point to time in this conversation theory. So Justin, can you share with us about goodbye circles and how LCCS conducts them, like what they're about?
Sure, happy to. So I think before I talk about goodbye circle, I must tell you what a welcome circle is. Remember I said like it's really strange to say, okay, so now you're going off, you're putting so much effort to say a goodbye. When a person joins, how do you welcome that person? So we have welcome circles. We take care of the beginning and the end and the middle experience. In a welcome circle, it's an opportunity to get to know a new staff or even an intern So it's also a good opportunity to help them start off with a first-hand experience of the culture at LCCS. On one level, I can tell you what we are about. On the second level, we can provide an experience. So actually the colleagues take turns to facilitate the welcome circles. Even the interns take turn. Everyone who's available, you can choose to attend. So one of our principles is willing participation. We don't force people to attend a welcome circle if you don't want to. Some of the sample questions, if you're wondering, is, and we do it on Zoom, by the way, because of COVID. So we ask them, ask things like, share about your role in LCCS. For the new person coming in, what was your previous role in your past community or organization? We would ask, how would your colleague at LCCS describe you? Or we would say, how would your ex-colleague describe you? What is one thing you are good at which you can be approached for? In fact, just yesterday, we had the second closing day of our staff retreat. And this new colleague who joined, I think in June, she shared about a story of how she managed to break through from a difficult situation, and she approached one of the colleagues for help. And she said, I remember when I came for the welcome circle, this individual said, if I have this problem, go to him. And I took him at his word and I did. So she actually remembered that. So the welcome circle is really helpful. Now, what is a goodbye circle? So it's same thing, opportunity for the outgoing staff or intern or colleague to have an opportunity for meaningful closure. It is also a time where we honor the individual regardless of the extent of contribution or the length of service. So even if you're an intern, you've been with us for 3 months, you will have a goodbye circle. It's also a time for even colleagues who have experienced termination to come and join a goodbye circle. And we had that even for staff who have been terminated. And it's really because you can still honor that person as a person, even though the work might fall short of certain standards. And it also helps a person to walk away feeling a bit more restored rather than I've been terminated. And the last memory I have of this organization is that I've been terminated. And sometimes I think in HR practice, I've had some friends in HR who said, don't talk so much. The more you say, the more troublesome it will be for you. Actually, we do the opposite. We talk a lot. We ask questions, we have that conversation because we don't want the person, it's most hurtful for the person to walk away not knowing why he or she had to move on. And the goodbye circle then honors the individual. So some sample questions of what we ask in a goodbye circle include, describe what is your first impression of the organization. Was there a funny or fond incident? And how would you want to be remembered as? And everyone shares. Actually, another simple way, I think there's this question, if a person want to leave in a quiet way, you can still have that conversation one-on-one. Or you can ask this individual, if I were to invite another 1 or 2 colleagues, who would you like to be here in this conversation? Again, empowering the person, asking the person, giving choice. It doesn't have to be an organization goodbye circle. It can just be a small conversation. And actually 3 simple A's that I really love. Actually, we did this with the pre-conversation. What is something you appreciate about the person? That's the first A. Another A is, what is an aha moment? The third A is an apology. And you don't have to answer all 3. You can choose one of the A's. So you're providing an opportunity for people to apologize if they want to. You're providing an opportunity for a person to affirm if they want to, or even just to share a new realization about self or the organization. So I think that these are some ways. The managers, I think there's a question by Anisha about the managers. So the managers attend the goodbye circle. So they have that experience, they have a chance to share. But in case it is a difficult exit, we provide opportunity for the managers to have what we call a listening circle, where this manager maybe is accompanied by other colleagues and we have a circle to talk about. So what was the experience like for you? What was most difficult? And there's also this other process called compassionate witnessing. You can Google. I don't think there's a lot of time to talk about that, but that's another process that we offer for managers. I think I'm just going to stop here for now.
Thank you, Justin. So actually, from the last time I met Justin on this topic, and he shared about these goodbye circles, I actually facilitated my first goodbye circle. And another question that he suggested, which he didn't mention previously, was, what are some well wishes that you want to share for this person who's moving on? And also to ask the person moving on, what would you hope this organization would continue doing after you have departed? So I thought that was such good questions, and the goodbye circle that I facilitated went really well. So thank you, Justin, for sharing that. I mean, I hope that, for everyone who's in the room listening to all these ideas from the speakers and even from the chat, if there's any principles or practices that you think might be applicable into your own context, please feel free to apply them into your own situations.
Grace, I'm just jumping in here because there is few direct questions here. For me, this is especially about, how do you transition in the exit process if it is due to an abusive boss or a toxic work culture? So I wanted to bring up that slide on the shareholders in the exit process, who are the various shareholders. And then we can just talk about briefly in terms of what is the role of each of these shareholders, during the exit phase. So let's talk about the one which is the individual leaving. So I'm assuming here the person is leaving here because of the toxic boss or an abusive boss or a toxic work culture. I have maintained that for the person leaving, and I have upheld that value for myself because I've changed jobs due to various reasons, is your personal brand is way bigger than the brand that you're associated with. And what I mean by that is, irrespective of the ask from the organization or irrespective of the behavior of the organization towards me, I will continue to hold highest level of professionalism while I'm exiting from the company, which basically means that I would continue to, do a very good handover, document, what is lying where and who's responsible and who's taking over for me. There's one document which I'm going to hand over. I will continue to give right advice, not something, since I'm going, so it's your funeral, so I don't care, if I'm consulted during that time. Because in my mind, personal brand is something in a long run that it makes you stand taller than the organization that you're associated with. When we are very junior, we see our identity linked. Oh, I'm an executive in Deloitte Consulting. I'm an executive in PwC. But is there a brand which is beyond these titles? Is it Shelly Gupta? Is there a brand like that? Can you build that consistently? And that comes from how you behaved in these tough situations. What was your response to, to a very unpleasant situation that you're facing? So you need to keep your chin up. You need to continue to do things which is right and for the good for the organization, in my mind. And that is what kind of puts you as this thing. The other thing is about the organization, right? Organization's response to the exit. Instead of behaving like you've been betrayed, can they be generous enough to respect you? And I think we spoke enough about that. Justin spoke enough about what should be the organization response or the leader's response to the exit. The last one is the colleagues, and that is where I think I find that very funny when colleagues starts disengaging. They start seeing where the power is, and they start aligning with the power. So they're sitting at the fence engaging, with this person exit, where is the balance of power? So how do we align ourselves? Should we stay with the leader or should we stay with the exiting person? And sometimes some of these farewell calls you're going to get is in strict confidence, and they will choose places so that the rest of the organization can't see that, you're taking this colleague out for farewell. In my mind, if you're a team member, just be respectful about the person. Doesn't matter what your leader thinks about, it's your fear in your mind that your career is going to be impacted. What matters is how competent you are on the job and how good you are to the human beings, So don't care and just continue to be a good team member and stay. You would be surprised when I exited, there's so many of the people who till date reach out to me for references, for recommendations, for career guidance. And even if I'm not part of the organization, I continue to give that to them, because they respect you for who you are. And that is what matters, right? Grace?
Thanks, Shirley. Alvin, you had a question?
Yeah, I thought I'd put it out here in a conversation I had in the breakout room. I think it's breakout room 10. And basically they were asking the volunteer manager, or rather not even a volunteer manager, but someone who is looking after the program, how do they help volunteers exit gracefully when they do not want the volunteers? You know, the whole situation is turned around because they are afraid of hurting the volunteers' feelings. So they have a sticky situation where this volunteer has been contributing over many years or has been there for many years, but they do not know how to exit the volunteer in a graceful way. I'm not sure if this is if there's any opinions on this. Yeah.
Shirley, any quick thoughts?
That's a open question.
Yeah, just rephrase it for me once, just in a short sentence. What is your ask exactly?
So organization X has volunteers that they want to exit, but
So
they're
you're
hurting.
Yeah,
this.
You're talking about involuntary exits, right?
Yeah.
I think the biggest news I want you guys to watch, which I think is a day old, or there is a company called better.com. They have actually, in fact, has even posted the video of the CEO. He has fired 900 people on a Zoom call. He just invited 900 people on a Zoom call and said that, if you're on this call, I'm sorry, I just wanted to tell you that right away from this moment, you're no more part of the organization. And then their emails were disengaged. And this video is doing viral, guys, if you want to watch it, right? And there's a huge debate which is going on in the HR fraternity, whether that was the right way or a wrong way to do it, right? Even if it is an involuntary exit because of performance, because of fraud, because of not having a place for the person in the organization, as I said, these are painful conversations because many a times from the employee, from the staff or a volunteer, there is a denial, in these conversations. And to kind of avoid these conflicting conversations because they can be tiring, organizations tend to take a shortcut, which is not have a conversation and just start using a threat that if you're not going to resign, we're going to give you a termination, or do something like what better.com did, on a video chat, just fired people. It's easy, right? I don't have to engage in a one-on-one conversation. In my mind, it is still worth it to, however tiring it is, to have a meaningful conversation and give that space and time to the individual to share their anxiety or being anxious. Something which as an HR person, I've always maintained is that you may not have a place under the sun in this organization, but you definitely have a place under the sun somewhere else. And if you think you need me to validate that competence in you, I'm happy to do that. Please feel free to reach out to me if you want any recommendation. I'm happy to highlight your strengths for the new position that you could be approaching, or you could be, but if you're asking me, in so many years of my HR career, making separation pleasant, especially the involuntary ones, which are largely the where you're asking people to go, has been very tough ones, very, very tough ones. I mean, tremendous negotiations, and it has been, you try very hard, but you still kind of leave a little bit of that bitterness in the person. I don't know if that answers.
Thanks, Shaylee.
Thanks, Shaylee. And thank you, Justin and Alvin as well. This wraps up the panel discussion segment. But before I close the panel and we move back into the breakout, I'm just going to let the three speakers share an offer. So Justin's offer, which I will share my screen and let him speak.
Oh, yes, thank you very much. And I'll speak super fast, okay? I think first response is, I did have an experience of a staff termination and he attended a goodbye circle.
Oh, no, Justin, you muted
Justin,
yourself.
you're muted.
You're muted.
Oh my gosh, I spoke so fast. I covered like, anyway, okay. Yeah, so I said a quick response. I did a staff termination this year. It was difficult, and he actually attended goodbye circle. If you want to hear more, email me, my email's in the chat. Second, this is about the course that we just rolled out this year. It's on Skills Future. In fact, if you go to Skills Future and you type in restorative, 2 courses come out. One is to restore your teeth, and the other one is to restore your relationship at workplace. So this is the one. It's 28% funded by SSG if it's company sponsored. You can claim for absentee payroll, SFEC, ETSS, MCES, SFC. If you're a HR person, you know what all this means. But the good news is if you're self-sponsored and you're above 40 years of age, it's 90% funded. So you only pay $120 for 3 days course. You can claim from your $5 skills future training. So it's absolutely free and you still have some left over to attend the dentist course that I told you about. There is an upcoming run on the 15th to 17th December. It's on-site training. But of course, there'll be separate runs and it's also based on safe management measures. This is really just our way to share our practices. We are a charity, but we need to earn some revenue so that we can buffer the drop in fundraising. In fact, I think that charities have quite a fair bit to offer in corporate training because we don't really have a lot of resources and financial handles or incentives. So that's why the engagement of staff is so critical and it costs us a lot if we don't spend time to build workplace relationships. That is my pitch and please check this out. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Justin. Shaylee?
Yeah, I think just hearing Justin, I'm just excited about making on-the-spot offer to all of you. If any one of you are having troubled as a leader or somebody exiting because of dealing with a toxic boss, toxic culture, and you need any advice on, smooth exit, feel free to reach out to me. I may ask you, I may not charge you the consultancy charges, but I may ask you for a small donation to the charity of your choice in response. If that works for any one of you, please feel free to reach out to me. I'll be very happy to help any one of you if you need any help on exit process.
Thanks, Shaylee. And Alvin, your offer.
Okay, a quick one. I dropped the link to YCM webpage, and there you can see like a quick video about why to join YCM, how do you join it. So feel free to put in an application there. I think the video itself speaks volume much more than what I can say. We did that for YCM 15. So in my introduction slide, I showed about a picnic. That was like for our 10th anniversary. And last year we did our 15th anniversary. And that was a video that we made for it. Yeah, so feel free to join. And you can always reach out to me through LinkedIn. Yeah.
All right, thank you to the very awesome speakers. We're gonna do one thing, which is take a group photo and then